that going, Sharice?
Yep.
Awesome, cool. Wow. Thanks, everybody. I think the biggest thing that we want to accomplish today was just to go over the feedback from the steering committee and make any tweaks and then sort of plan out our next steps for public engagement. So just to review, is it okay if I screen share, Sharice?
Yes, you should have that ability.
Let me see if I have the right thing up to screen share. Okay. So just to review, the biggest, I thought the meeting went really well. I thought we got really good feedback from the steering committee. So I think most of you all were able to be on that meeting. There were a couple little tweaks to the guiding principles that will be really simple to make. I don't think we need to spend a lot of time on those. There were some, I think maybe where we need a little bit more input from you all is the feedback regarding the vision statement. So the two pieces of information I heard that we probably need to discuss is that there was a request to also reference commerce in the vision statement as being as important as some of these other aspects. And then there was also the comments related to the references so specifically to Freebridge, Woolen Mills, and Pantops area that we could probably use some feedback from you all to figure out if we need to make some adjustments to this vision statement to capture those, or if we can move forward. So first of all, is there anything else related to the vision statement that you all heard that I missed? And second, we'd just like to hear some of your feedback related to those comments.
Sandy, for me, I lost you on the first item, but that you mentioned, but was that Corey's reference to economic? Okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah, correct.
I think I heard them talk about it being a future vision statement and maybe even a small tweak in the middle where it says the river corridor is and will continue to be. Maybe if we just tweak it to say the river corridor is and will be, right? So it's not just continuing what's present, but really just forward.
Mm-hmm.
And while I think there was some concern about specifically calling out the area that is the focus for this effort, the point of the first sentence was to talk about the river in its entirety.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm sort of okay with, I didn't think that needed to be tweaked, even though some people seem to fixate on the next sentence. I thought it was clear to me, Crystal, like you said, the first sentence kind of qualifies the bigger picture of things.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and there isn't really a name that captures those three places sort of in aggregate.
So, and I'm not sure throwing another name out, or like you said, another regional name, I'm not sure what it is. So I'm not sure how you would make it any broader, as long as you read the two sentences together.
Yeah.
The economic development thing, I guess you could add a sentence that says that that this vibrant kind of open space natural area does also contribute to economic development and a quality community to the surrounding community, and sort of just say that it's an attribute that helps that. But I sort of understood where everyone was. The focus isn't about economic development in this directly. But it does have that residual effect, perhaps, and maybe you could acknowledge it, that aspect of it.
I know for the PDC folks, as we were kind of trying to develop the initial draft of the vision statement before, we sort of but before the county and the city really started having significant amounts of input into tweaking it and adjusting it. It was really hard to get. There are a lot of things we want to do with this corridor. It was really hard to get it all into one vision statement and still have it be like pretty defined and focused. So you know, we do have the guiding principles, and supporting appropriate types of economic development is listed in there. So the question is that sufficient, or do we need to find a way to also include some reference to, you know?
So when they reference economic development, do you think they mean, you know, bars, restaurants, things like that, right? More than, you know, offices or in industry, right? And so I wonder if we were to add something on the, I guess, third from the bottom line, where it says enjoy healthy outdoor activities, it could say something like enjoy entertainment and healthy outdoor activities. And maybe entertainment kind of falls in that category of dining or other things that are not just sports.
We could say something like enjoy the outdoors through healthy activities and entertainment, or I don't know.
River-oriented commerce.
River-oriented commerce. Yeah, I like that phrase.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's kind of like academic sounding, but that's, I don't know.
What we're talking about.
Yeah, not like big, as somebody else said, not big office complexes jammed up against the bluff, but maybe something a little more, you know, carefully sited and taking advantage of the asset that is the river and its kind of environs.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that would work. I actually think it's okay the way it is. I didn't think it was actually necessary. I understood Corey's point, but I think to me, it was actually covered with the guiding principles. But that would be a way to tweak it to, if we think that's what the whole steering committee was looking for. I think that might be a way to go.
Okay, let me say this just so I can avoid us having to make an amendment and coming back and revisiting this. If we add the phrase, be a vibrant place where people experience a quiet and serene natural environment, enjoy healthy outdoor activities, support river-oriented commerce, maybe there's a better verb I can use there, but something along those lines, and add that in there, would you guys be okay with that being the final sort of draft of the vision statement moving forward?
I think that sounds good. It'd be great to just see it once for like a final look over. It's just my personal opinion.
Okay.
And I apologize if this is too like nitty gritty, but the punctuation kind of flips between commas and semicolons.
Yeah.
And I'm a big semicolon fan, so I'd use that to break up the different clauses about like, you know, normally it'd almost be like a bullet point list, but in a vision statement, it has to be this big, complex idea.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, we'd actually adjusted it for the well, I adjusted one of the slides. I forgot that there were two that were kind of similar, but we adjusted one of the slides for the presentation. But we can make that change before we put it out publicly anywhere, of course. So yeah, I appreciate that feedback. Okay,
another word, just I hate to belabor it, but another way, because I think river-oriented commerce is kind of a heavy phrase, and so much of the committee seemed leaning towards the environmental protection side of it, so that I think there was one voice that really was advocating for the economic piece, but we could also do something like say, enjoy healthy outdoor activities and venues, right? And so the venues might be a word that captures those things that are river-oriented businesses.
Mm-hmm.
Do you guys think that's a little bit more succinct too, which helps? Do you guys think that would capture it?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So that's the only change that we're going to make. So what we'll do is we will, Charisse or Nick, could one of you make that revision and send it out? And then I think our next plan for this is to put it on the website and give the public some opportunities for feedback to say, do you agree or disagree with this, and provide comments, just so we can start getting some of that feedback from the public as well. So if we send this out, do you guys think you could respond maybe by Friday at noon? Just a thumbs up or thumbs down?
Yep.
Cool. Okay. And so then the other changes were just, you know, I just want to confirm, I think everybody was on the same page, and I don't think it was anything really significant, but the idea that the guiding principle that the environmental preservation needs to kind of be the overarching, because it has to, if environmental preservation is going to be a guiding principle, then that basically has to be the first thing that's considered when moving forward to any of the other recommendations, implementations. So I thought that that was a really reasonable request, but does anybody have any additional comments they want to provide related to that?
I was glad to hear it.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Well, and I could imagine that graphic having environmental, whatever the word is, as a ring around the whole wheel graphic.
Yeah, like kind of holding everything else together. I think that's a good, yeah, that's kind of what I visualized when they're talking about it too. And then the other comments were just really, really minor, but is there anything else you guys want to talk about related to the guiding principles?
No, I think you guys did a good job at the committee meeting and the presentation.
Thank you.
It was good.
Yeah, I thought that meeting went really well. So, and I thought we got really good feedback. So that always feels good moving forward. So I think the next thing we need to talk about then are our next steps for public engagement. We did order signs, and we do have some signs that I think Nick and Sharice are going to put up along the river to direct people to the website. We took y'all's suggestions, and we have a couple that are like, enjoying your float, go to our website and tell us what you want to see on the river. And we did one kind of funny one that was like, do you think these signs look tacky? Tell us what you'd rather see on the river. So hopefully that will get some interest. And we put QR codes on all of them to, you know, so people could just scan the QR code on their phones and go to the website. So we're hoping that that will get some traffic to the website. So we'll get those up. And then we wanted to talk about the engagement to the folks that have properties and businesses abutting the river that we wanted to do some direct outreach to. The feedback from the steering committee is that the city and county staff probably should be utilized to do some of the outreach to some of those business and property owners. My feeling is that we want to, you know, move forward on the public engagement, and it's probably not going to be a good use of our resources to do that with everybody, but that there probably are really important relationships for some of these really key property owners that we need to be sensitive about. So I'm going to kind of rely on the city and county staff to tell us what the best approach is. My thought is that you guys would let us know who needs to have a little bit more of a thoughtful, personal outreach effort, and then we can make sure that for everyone else that's involved, we still want them to be well informed, and we could do mailings to let them also know about that. But we kind of just need you guys to guide us in that process.
Tim, you got thoughts? I know you guys met while I was on vacation or out of the office. So
Yeah.
catch up.
I think I'm tracking along with you, Sandy, and feel the same way pretty strongly. I think that level of sensitivity and like customized outreach is maybe a little bit different for like the corridor plan in general, but then because the plan already includes some like proposed projects like the bike ped crossing from Pantops to Woolen Mills, that is so specific. Like that's a particular project that I think requires, you know, that hand holding and like really careful outreach plan. And then there's like something in the middle of those two categories maybe, which is like the county's greenway planning. So the old Mills Trail obviously exists across from the Rivanna Trail. But to extend that upstream towards like 29 North and Brook Hill Park, and then to extend it to the south towards like Clifton and Milton and places downstream. You know, I don't think those are new ideas and don't necessarily require the same level of outreach and engagement as the Rivanna Bridge. So I guess I see like a gradient of need or gradient of care. But the big one that does kind of seem like requiring a ton of thought and strategy is, I guess, State Farm. It looks like that proposed bridge would engage their property with right-of-way acquisition, or maybe even just an easement, but it would require, you know, their property or a portion of it. And we would just want to make sure there's a good process in place so that they're not surprised.
Mm-hmm.
Sandy, for that project, because I haven't really followed that one closely. Kevin McDermott and others have been more involved with that and Tim, I assume, from Parks and Rec. But that's a consultant report. The consultant work is done. Was there any public input aspect to the consultant's work?
Not yet. That's going to be the next step.
But it is part of their contract?
I'm not 100% sure that it's necessarily a robust process. I think the PDC is probably going to have to step in and provide a lot of that support to move it forward. They have to have some sort of public input, but I don't think it's contracted in that it necessarily needs to be a large, robust public engagement effort necessarily. Would you agree with that, Tim and Dan? You guys have been involved with that a little bit more, yeah.
And that hasn't taken place yet. The consultant's just been doing the engineering and feasibility aspect of it.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Dan, you're muted.
Yeah, I think I'm supposed to stay mute. While there hasn't been public engagement directly related to this particular effort in time, over the years, as we all know, it's been spoken to and addressed with the community. It's not an unknown. Pantop's master plan, the bike ped plan, this has shown up for a long time, and it's had a lot of vetting in the past, I guess.
In those past exercises, has anybody from State Farm engaged? Or if they just kind of turned their head and let the planning stuff happen?
Well, now that's a good point, because up until recently, the site we were looking at landing the bridge on the Pantop side didn't really involve anything new from State Farm. We were working hopefully with the idea that we could get a connection coming through the development project, but it just hasn't turned out that way. So yeah, that's a good question.
Well, and it's one thing to discuss a planning exercise, it's another to see a potential location on the ground and a $11 and $13 million cost. So this is where is that what the costs were, if I recall? I don't remember the exact cost. So I think this is moving to the next level of those people that see it in a comp plan, and half of them don't really understand what a comp plan really does. Now seeing something on the ground could change. So I think I was just trying to get a feel for, is there something already kind of programmed, and how we dovetail into that and its timing. So I'm not going anywhere with it yet, just getting that background.
That's all right. We're here to talk everything out.
Yeah. Well, I think certainly we feel like we need to, and the city needs to be involved in sort of giving you guidance as to how to deal with certain properties. I don't want to give, maybe it's just terminology. I want to give everyone an opportunity and an equal effort of access and opportunity to comment. We're not ignoring other people. So I always get a little nervous about emphasizing one group over another, but there are certainly strategic properties that probably we need to make sure that we touch base with them. And that would be in the areas where we do think there are improvements that we're moving forward with.
Well, and I know Joey's on for the city as well, but Chris Jensick had also made comments, that there are specific properties, and I'll jump a little bit ahead, but one of the, I'm sure this won't surprise anybody, but as far as the benchmarking goes, one of the really common themes is just about having a really robust trail network and making sure that there are clear connections and bridging gaps and things like that. And some of that might also involve some property acquisition as well. And that was an area that Chris said that he thought he would be able to provide support. So again, I think if the plan has implications for anybody potentially, you know, us wanting to access their property or provide a public access over their property, I think those probably do merit some personal attention.
Tim, did in our conversations at the county level, or Kim or Tim, did we sort of, did you set a kind of game plan for providing the TJPDC staff an approach to public input, what our expectations are, or is that a next step for us?
I think that's still a next step. I think Cameron set up a meeting to talk about the Pantop CAC meeting later this month. I think it's like the 28th, pretty late in the month. But the plan for that particular CAC meeting, you know, obviously needs to fit into what the corridor plan engagement needs to be, and vice versa. So I think we'll have a little more clarity soon.
Okay. All right.
Why don't I suggest this then, just in the spirit of having us move forward? We can go ahead and create some sort of like packet or flyer or something like that that can just serve as a general mail out. We'll hold off on planning any of this, because the other thing I don't want to do is to jump ahead and, you know, provide more information to the public ahead of you all being able to have some of these conversations or do some of this outreach. So I think regardless, we're going to need that contact information from you all as well. You know, I don't know if Nick, do we have like the property owner parcel information to that level of detail with addresses?
I don't think we have it like just stored in our system.
Okay.
I mean, the county and the city's online GIS is, you know, sufficient to be able to pull that.
Yeah. So, but also there's, I know y'all can pull it really quickly.
Yeah, we can generate that, and then we can set some priorities, I guess. We figure out what our expectations are for individual property owners. So we can certainly give you a list and kind of go through that.
Yeah, so if you guys can kind of let us know who to send the mailings to, and then kind of determine among yourselves who needs to have that higher level of maybe a conversation prior to us sending them out. I think that's just where we're going to need to rely on you all to do some of that. And then we can support that conversation. I mean, I think what's tricky there is you all have the relationships already with them, but I mean, we're happy to, you know, maybe do a webinar or something specifically for those people, whatever it is that we need to do. But maybe once we have that list and can strategize, we can.
We'll identify the ones that like us and the ones that don't like us. And you can talk to the ones that don't like us, and we'll talk to the one that does.
Yeah.
And we'll be set. So.
That's one of my superpowers from working in local government is I'm really good at getting yelled at this point. So.
Yeah, I think Dan and a lot of folks have good relationships with folks, but yeah. So I think we can give you that list.
Okay.
Sandy, Cameron and I met with Roger Johnson and Chris Engel last fall and sort of went through this.
Okay.
And identified who the people we needed to. I wrote up a memo that I sent to everybody who was on the committee at that time. The only one that we talked about since then is State Farm. But I think we kind of left it that we could go back to economic development, and Jason Ness and Chris and Roger Johnson would have a way to help us create a strategy for what the best way to reach out to each of those. And they certainly have a better sense than I do of how we need to start these conversations. And I think they were expecting us to go back to them. So if we need to go back to the economic development folks, we can.
Okay.
Or if we're meeting every 2 weeks, would it make sense to see if they could join a conversation?
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, it might be good to bring them in now because, you know, the shopping center and the apartment that are on the beach area are going to be real strategic areas. They've got frontage over there. I think we've already worked with them somewhat, Dan and Tim, perhaps, but probably a good time to get economic development in.
Okay.
That's a good idea.
Thank you, Jerry. I had forgotten about that, but I'm glad you remembered or reminded us. Okay, so this is what I'm hearing. We can develop sort of a general mail out, but we're going to hold off on doing any sort of targeted outreach along the river, at least until our next meeting. In the meantime, for public engagement, though, we'll go ahead and get the vision statement and the guiding principles up on the website for folks to respond to. We'll put the signs up to start directing them to the website. And hopefully that will also help us start getting some updated information to send out to people who are interested in it as we move forward to get additional feedback. Do you all have a preference? Do you want us to go ahead and put the draft recommendations that we've been going through up there as well for comment?
Have those been shared with the steering committee?
They were shared in a Word document. We didn't go through them in detail, but they did have them in their packets prior to the meeting.
I mean, I think it might be fine to put them out there. If nothing else, by the time it comes back to the steering committee for consideration, it might be interesting if there's any comments that we've received on them, as long as that, you know, there's a disclaimer that this is a working draft.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, because you didn't go over those with the steering committee, right? You just,
Yeah.
That sounds like a good approach.
I just think it's unlikely that you're going to get people to come and do any sort of engagement or public comment multiple times. And so if it can be clear that there are kind of three components that we're looking for feedback on, then maybe people can just engage at whatever level is relevant to them. Like maybe they don't care about the vision statement and the guiding principles, but there's something about those recommendations that does feel relevant to comment on.
I also think that the more like I don't know, like when you start getting into the more implementable strategies, that's where people start seeing how this is actually going to maybe have a personal impact on how they use the river. So it can also start generating some thoughts and feedback and other ideas.
So I have, you know, a question. I don't know if it's on our agenda or if this is the right place to throw it out there, but increasingly, a lot of what we do, we're being asked if we're considering equity, and I don't know that that's necessarily the lens that we collectively are using, but each of the city and the county have offices that I think there's staff in those offices that would be good to bring into this process as well, to help think about what is it, how are these things worded, and is there something that we should be thoughtful about?
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I actually had maybe a slightly related thought, but related to accessibility, especially as I was reading the Richmond plan. Like one of the things I really emphasized was making sure that the plan was ADA accessible and that there were recreational opportunities for people of all different mobility levels and that kind of thing. So I think those are really important concepts, and especially when we're talking about, you know, infrastructure investment and how that's going to be accessed and who's going to use it. I think there are some really good tie-ins.
And I think that word accessibility can also be relevant when you think about equity. You know, who in the community is currently using the river corridor and who is not, and why not? And is there something about what we're doing that really needs to be intentional about making sure we're not just creating a special place for a small population?
Mm-hmm. No, that's a really great point. Any other thoughts on that?
No, makes sense.
And who's the? I know Siri is the contact at the county. Who's the contact at the city?
So Todd, I'm blanking on his last name. I think maybe, is he in our office? He's in our
Well, we have Beck Grimm.
Human Rights. What's that?
Sorry, Beck Grimm would be for ADA and accessibility.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I don't know if Todd in our Office for Human Rights would be the right person, or if I don't know, Brenda, if you're on the call, if maybe you know if we have a position filled yet that is focused on equity? I'm not certain. And if not, then we need to kind of maybe pull together and think about how the city can bring some thoughtful perspective on it.
So I know we don't have the position filled for the equity position,
Mhm.
but Todd might be able, he's really good with that stuff. Todd Niemeyer.
Yeah,
his
he's
name?
really good. Yeah.
We may just even want to drag him into a conversation to see if he thinks that's something he could help with.
Would you like us to just include them on the next invitation or the next agenda, or do you guys want to reach out to them?
I guess I'm not sure about the timeline, but I think the conversation about reaching out to individual property owners is probably very different than the conversation about equity and access. So maybe that becomes a focus for the next
Next
meeting.
technical team meeting.
Okay.
Because
Yeah, I
that would
think so.
afford those folks a little bit of time to get some background and understand why we're bringing them in at this point.
Okay. All right, that sounds good. So our next meeting will focus still on the public engagement, and then after that we'll focus on the equity. The only consideration I want to make sure is that we're not getting too far in the process to pull in the equity conversation, so it doesn't feel like an afterthought. But I think we're still okay with that.
Or we can be very careful and say the first 30 minutes is about the outreach and the second 30 minutes is about the other topic, and we invite the folks to those particular sections.
Yeah, we could do that as well. Yeah, I like that suggestion as well. I think that's a full agenda. Okay, so that's a good game plan, Ben.
Can I ask a dumb question? Just
Sure.
and it relates to the recommendations. So we have maps, right? And the maps have labels that call for possible improvements and some descriptions. Do they correspond to the recommendations? In other words, if someone looked at a map and they saw the bridges, because some people, when they're very visual, they won't, like Crystal said, I think a lot of people are going to be focused on the recommendations and probably maps if the maps are available. Have we explained all the recommendations on those maps and what they mean in some real clear way? You understand what I'm?
Yeah, I think the maps were definitely generated prior to the recommendations. The recommendations were informed by the maps, but I don't know if there's any Nick, you can probably address that more if there's a specific tie together.
Yeah, I don't think there's a clear cross reference to the specific recommendations as they exist now to the maps. Caveating that with the work that the county did to kind of identify certain like the stream restoration kind of points and whatnot. I haven't gone back and seen if there's again that kind of specificity to the recommendations list, but
Okay.
do that, and then that may end up being a separate kind of mapping exercise of mapping all of those recommendations into one kind of consolidated piece.
Yeah, well, I mean, some people are map challenged, and just the boat launches are shown, and those are actually existing. They're not proposed, I think. They're in the Darden Tow and Riverview Park. But, I'm wondering just to have some clarity when they look at a map that they understand something's proposed or not proposed or conceptual. And if the corresponding recommendations, which I recall to be a little bit broader, just want to be able for people to understand what the maps are proposing. So maybe it's just a matter of proposed river crossings. What does that mean? Pedestrian crossings, fords, bridges. I don't know. Just want to make sure people don't misunderstand the maps if we're using it as part of the public engagement process. Anyway.
I think that's a good point, David. And I guess along the same lines, but a slightly different example is just, unless I missed a legend somewhere, I know there's multiple bridge icons shown for possible crossing locations. And it seems like we could head off a lot of angst or concern if it was just more clearly conveyed that those are possible locations for a proposed bridge, like option 1, 2, or 3, or, I mean, there's lots of ways to do it, but just to make sure it's clear that we're not like ignorantly proposing 6 or 8 bridges. I know that's obvious to all of us, but if you pick it up for the first time and you're not in planning and design and engineering world, it may not be obvious.
Yeah, because either end of the bridge sits on a property that will be notified them, and they'll be looking at it. So to understand what the scope of it, or whether it's a schematic or conceptual location or specific, that might be a useful piece for the public to have.
Mm-hmm.
If I could say something on that, David, you're right. There really isn't anything that I've seen that really show concepts, potential concepts. But I will say that most of that corridor between I-64 and the upper reaches of Penn Park, which sort of define the area, most of it has been acquired and is managed by parks, or on the city side with trail easements and agreements. But anchors on either end, we've got a potential or master plan coming along with Dardental Park. We have a plan with adjacent to Dardental Park that could be shown to show some examples of character and the quality of what we're looking at doing on the river corridor. And then the other anchor for this is the Woolen Mills project on one side of the river. The changes, what that's going to look like. We have enough to start talking about that. And then on the Pantop side, we've got the Palisades, we've got Martha Jefferson's interest in, from the very beginning, their original rezoning site plan showed an interest in connecting to the river. There's a couple of access points that show up in the Pantop's plan that we've actually moved along. I think it's important to show those. Those are important parts to the vitality or the future use of the rivers, how you get down there. And then the piece that we originally acquired from State Farm is pretty significant. It's more than just a trail corridor. We intentionally acquired enough property with that dedication that a future riverfront heritage park would fit really nicely in there with where the old locks are, and to add to that, I mean, we don't really want to speak much to what's happening beyond the study area, but the future of Shadwell, Monticello's property, that whole corridor is destined to become a really interesting, not only recreational, but heritage type of interest. And those things, it would be good to have a map that sort of puts a little bit of marker or color into those potentials, especially since we have the plans that you can point to in areas.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I guess.
Yeah, those are good points. I think we could do better at integrating some of the work that's already been done into the corridor planning moving forward. And like with Riverside Village Park, there's a draft master plan approved for that. With some really nice renderings and
exactly, that's what I'm talking about.
Sort of like, vignettes and things like that show kind of the character and texture. I mean, I think once we go to Pantops with that might be the first step, but then, expanding the awareness and expanding the engagement with that draft plan. But yeah, those are good points, for sure.
Yeah, and I know this is sort of an awkward subject with the Rivanna River Company. With what I understand is they're not totally zoned in properly, but to point to that partnership, that opportunity for recreation related endeavors, private endeavors, I think is really important. And I think for a lot of people, that gave their effort actually have brought a lot of people to understanding and seeing the river
Mhm.
that they haven't in the past. And that, I think that type of economic opportunity would be helpful to demonstrate in a future possibility. We do have conceptual plans for a whitewater park that hasn't really gone over real well. The idea of artificially creating, putting boulders out and creating a whitewater rapids like some urban areas do, but I just don't think the Rivanna is.
Yeah.
Well, it's an opinion. It's an opinion.
I want to also stay focused in on what is expected for phase 2 and phase 3. So maybe some of the more detail is really taking the broader concepts. So I wasn't saying the map needed to be overly complicated, but if we show an area for a beach, is that a public beach? Is that acknowledging a natural beach area? Is for it, just so that people understand what that means, and does that beach area have an access point or something like that? Those are the questions we might get that are going to lead to, or if that's a general public access concept, we'll design it, I guess, in phase 3, but get some input about where the sort of the access points, the activity areas are. I would think that's what we want from the abuttings and nearby property owners. Is this where you want activity? Is this where you want preservation? And just to be able to interpret the pieces that are shown on this map so that people kind of, as clearly as we know, as can what that concept is.
Yeah. Dave, I absolutely agree with you. I think it's important. I've been surprised with some of the businesses, some of the uses that have come along that aren't aware of this linear park effort that's forming along the river, especially at Pantops. When the tire company first moved in there, you know, I went and introduced myself to the neighbor by they were actually tossing their tires over the bank because they didn't realize that it was a park. I think that this is an opportunity to sort of plant that seed with the future businesses that they have a waterfront property. They have, instead of putting their dumpsters along the rivers, that they could turn their whole face to the river and meet the effort that we're looking at with making that a really special destination as opposed to just a leftover piece of ground. I think that's, you know, you'd think it's obvious, but I've been really surprised at folks that just don't see that. And this is an opportunity with this plan to sort of speak to that.
I think, well, for one, we're definitely relying on you all to make sure that we're aware of the other planning efforts that should be dovetailed with this one. So, you know, I appreciate you mentioning those. And yeah, you know, we're working with Albemarle County. We'll work with the city as well to make sure that we know of the other plans and efforts that are going along with this. To make sure that, to do our best to make sure they're all integrated together. But I think this is a really good opportunity, not just to help inform the River Corridor project, but to help inform the public of the planning process in general and, you know, what's going on that might impact what Pantops or Woolen Mills or whatever looks like in 10, 15 years.
So is the idea on the website to list out these plans that are linked or related to this area so that somebody coming to the river, this corridor website, can go to other sites where that planning information is available, not necessarily replicating it, but being transparent that there are many other plans that touch this space, whether maybe not 100%, maybe it's more like a Venn diagram.
Yeah, or something that just says, here's a link to other planning processes nearby. Now, whether we've got information to link to yet or not, I don't know.
Right.
But that's,
But even if there's not an active web page, just acknowledging it by the title of a planning process, and then somebody could ask.
Right. Right. Yeah,
And
that's
it's
it.
Go ahead, Sandy.
No, I was just gonna say to help, and also to help reduce confusion, like not only to let people know what the other planning efforts are, but to help reduce confusion around, I thought there was already some plan for this area over here. So to help understand how all of these are different sort of pieces of a puzzle, and some of the pieces may overlap a little bit, but they all should come together, and they're all a little bit different, and that's why they're different efforts.
Would it even be possible to create some kind of a graphic that shows, you know, the footprint of these different planning efforts, or would that just look completely confusing?
Maybe
Because I'm confused about what plans cover what areas.
you mean kind of like a map that shows like the different geographic areas overlap. We could maybe do something like that. I'm not really a technical like map person, so Nick might have to comment better.
I mean, if you've got, I mean, short of like going through each of the plans and then digitizing, you know, like study areas, if you guys all have readily available shape files, then yeah, that would be easy. But just depends on what's in existence.
Yeah, I don't know.
But I would think that it would, I mean, it would be pretty straightforward, even if it was just kind of a generalized like
blobs
buffer map or something where, you know, we've got our corridor and then you've got the kind of Pantops master plan, and you could kind of shade it and whatnot, how they kind of interact and then overlap or don't overlap. So
Yeah, they're pretty much just going to be linear corridors to the north and south, and you're going to have two study areas that are adjacent or within. They're actually, right, the Riverside Park one is actually shown, so you just maybe circle it and say there's a separate, more specific planning effort for it. Two bridges down on, you know, Broadway and Chesapeake, you would circle it and say there's a more detailed study here if you want to look into it. I think it probably might be fairly easy to do.
yeah, if we had a good list of, and I guess, you know, we can connect offline, but of what those, you know, kind of planning efforts were, so that way we can inventory that and then pull the necessary information. But yeah, I mean, that wouldn't be anything to create that.
Is there any other? The last thing I wanted to talk about, if there's no other discussion on that, is just if there were any other organizations or agencies that specifically we should be reaching out to make sure that they're aware of this process in order to provide comment or feedback. So if we're holding off on a little bit more targeted engagement, I think we can wait if you guys want to think about it till our next meeting. But thinking, I don't know, the Conservation Alliance, the Chamber of Commerce locally, you know, if there are any, you know, I'm just kind of drawing a blank if there are like recreational facilities that we want to reach out to, I don't know, any sports organizations that utilize those, or any sort of like groups of people that aren't necessarily going to be important based on their geographical proximity, but are important based on either their interests or their or their utilization of the river. That's something else that we also want to consider, just to make sure that that feedback is also represented and that they're at least aware of this planning effort.
Well, the Rivanna Conservation Alliance, right?
Alliance.
Yeah, they would be an obvious one. I think you mentioned them already.
Yeah.
I would think the chamber would be one that we would want to.
I also think maybe the Parks and Rec Advisory Board.
Okay.
What about Darden Tow Advisory? But I mean, that's your guys' bailiwick. Do we need to be informing them in any? I don't know how that structure works.
You mean like the Lewis and Clark Center folks?
Well, that's the Lewis and Clark Center is one, but the Darden Tow Advisory Board, I think it's just 3 people. I think it's our director, Parks director, and maybe a couple other folks. They don't meet that often.
So,
but it's an impressive title.
I just don't want to leave out people.
Well, and Joey or Brenda, what about something like Place? Maybe it would be another committee that would be good to provide a FYI?
I'd be
Also,
hesitant
the
to that can of worms with place, but
Also, DCR and Game and Inland Fisheries. DCR, we have really strong partners there and a real investment in the scenic river corridor. Since the Rivanna was, one of the first named adopted, they have a lot of interest in it. And the Rivanna River is actually now part of linked into the concept for the James River Heritage Trail as they're starting to branch out. That's just it's always good to keep them in the loop with things they have an interest in this area.
Particularly regarding the scenic river designation, because bridge
That's what we-
crossings are actually discouraged on scenic rivers. So
Yeah.
they should be dialed into concepts of scenic river crossings.
We
That's a good-
barely had enough points for that designation. Yeah. Still, they're good partners, especially when it comes to grants.
Right.
They actually host one of the grants that we used to get a lot of.
Alright. I will,
The last one would be the service authorities, I think. Have they been looped in? Because they actually have,
Yeah.
I guess they're mostly Rivanna
Mhm.
lines, I guess, right, Dan? Or they?
It's
Albemarle?
Rivanna and the Service Authority, but yeah, some trails down there are sewer line trails. and I hate to mention that, but yeah, they are strong partners in the river corridor, and especially to be aware of it, because there's been times they've clear cut without warning, without even thinking about it, huge sections of area that totally surprised us, but they just didn't have the consciousness to think about that. That's a really good point, David, because they are definitely on the ground.
what utility company is it that has power lines through there? And should we also, is there a contact person as well to include them?
Well, Dominion
Was it Dominion?
has crossings, yeah.
I guess it would just be Dominion because
Yeah.
Appalachian isn't in that area, I don't think.
The other partnership that is out there that actually generated one of the early maps of the Rivanna in this area is the Virginia Historic Canals, Rivers and Canals group.
Okay.
They kind of come and go, but they are a very interested group in the cultural heritage aspects.
Okay.
And I'm working again with the state bird and wildlife watching effort that's actually comes through Game and Inland Fisheries. We're looking at getting Garden Towel Park added to the list of maps.
Okay. That's a good group. So I think whenever we do the public outreach, we can, we'll make sure that we also make sure some of these contacts are also notified as well. So again, if you think of others, we can hold off on that for right now. But yeah, we definitely want to make sure that those perspectives are recognized and incorporated into the plan development. And if you all think that we need to maybe do some more in-depth conversations with any of these folks as well, we can certainly do that.
Mhm.
But
Sandy, I'm also thinking at the last Riverfest, there were a lot of different groups that were tabling. And I think we've listed a lot of them, but we could probably get the list of who tabled at the last Flow Fest
Yeah.
and make sure that all those folks get some notification of what's going on.
Yeah, in generating that list, I developed a list of people to contact to invite. So I have an exhaustive list of potential partners that is in the can somewhere. I just have to dig it up.
Yeah, it makes me think like one of the groups that was there was like the, EMS services, whoever does
Yes.
water rescues and those,
Yep. And
especially
they are,
since one of our points in there is about safety on the river.
yep. And they are really engaged and want to be more engaged with the issue of river safety. Think about the kingfishers, the retired fly fishermen. I mean, there's a lot of partners that I have a list in the can I will send you that I've actually been working with for a while.
Great.
Thanks.
All right.
I forgot about that.
So just to recap then, it sounds like what we are going to do is we are going to send out a revised vision statement with the couple of tweaks that were recommended for the vision statement and the guiding principles. So we'll send that all out for you all to review. And then we are going to keep working on doing the benchmarking. We'll work on getting some marketing materials or some advertising materials together. And then we will also get the signs up along the river. And what you all are going to do is create the contact list, and we'll talk about that more for the public engagement. And we'll keep working on getting the list of plans together so we can start getting that information on the website, which is the other thing we're going to do. We're also going to update the website with the vision statement, guiding principles, and draft recommendations once we get the thumbs up from you all. Okay, and we'll keep working on this list of other stakeholders to make sure are contacted and communicated with. Is there anything that I missed or needs to be added?
Are you all going to be inviting the additional guests to the next meeting, or do you need one of us to help set that up? Chris Engel or Jason or Todd Niemeyer?
It might help if there's a conversation that comes from you all just to provide some additional context, but we'll be happy to send a meeting invitation out.
So for me, that's Siri and economic development.
Mm-hmm.
Joey, you'll take care of getting Jason and Chris?
Yeah, I'll talk to Jason and Chris.
Okay, and Brenda, do you want to talk to Todd or do you want me to?
Whatever you want.
So I'm kind of on vacation right now this week, so if you wouldn't mind doing it, that'd be awesome.
Okay, we'll do it. Not a problem.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Although it's pouring rain, just so you know. You all look like you're in the sunshine somehow, somewhere.
It was raining.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, great. Anything else, anybody? Thank you for making sure that loop was closed. Crystal, anything?
And then Nick, I guess if Nick needs the footprints or the shape files, or if we've got master plans that have GIS layers, and if you can create some kind of blob diagram, that'd be really cool. Thank you.
Joey, you mentioned a list of property owners. That was the city side property owners, or was it both sides?
So Cameron and I met with Roger Johnson and the city economic development folks, and we just talked about who in the area would be the key players. We had the memo, but we didn't pull a list of everybody. We just said like Wendell Wood and the Pantop Shopping Center people, just sort of those names came up.
So I'll get with Cameron and get that sort of list, but we'll go ahead and create our parcel list and look at it again. Okay, good. I just didn't want to repeat something that sort of had been finished. Great, thanks.
Nick, if you need help with the parcel list in the city, just let me know. I can put you in touch with the GIS people.
Yeah, I'll reach out to you, Joey. Tim sent, and thank you, Tim, just kind of an inventory of things that are going on the county side in terms of kind of past and then current planning efforts. So yeah, I can just connect with you offline.
And Nick, that may not be exhaustive. I just threw up some ideas in the chat box if other county staff want to look at that real quick and see if I missed anything. Cam, I don't know if the Stream Health Initiative kind of belongs in there, but that's just what I could spurt out real quick.
Yeah, maybe. There's not going to be an area, it's sort of the whole river, so.
It's definitely overlap.
Yeah.
And just, if that's not a familiar phrase, the Broadway Blueprint is sort of like the county's industrial park on Broadway Street that connects physically with Woolen Mills, you know, the actual mill. So that seems like it's all kind of the same.
I think that's it.
Okay.
Yep.
So, bye, everybody.
Bye, Dan.
Thanks. Good to see you.
Yep.
All right. Any other last thoughts, comments?
Good job. Thanks.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.
See ya.